One more time. You're close.
So this week on Gravel, we hear some updates from Montana's cross-country running community, and we learn if Case or John Deere really is the greatest tractor, or if International Harvester was destroyed when Case bought them. We also spend a little bit of time, no, let's face it, we spend all our time talking about the Powderhook aftermath. Yeah, that sucked.
That was bad.
That was bad.
Welcome to episode 6 of On Gravel. It is a beautiful September day in eastern Montana where I'm sitting. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing well. How about you, Eric?
Life is good in Lincoln. We're about 10 inches of rain in the last week. We drowned out our football game. We did not, however, drown out our dove season. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure. How are you, Andrew? What's going on in Montana?
It's beautiful Indian summer. The doves are flying. The sage grouse are flying. I finally got out after sage grouse. We have one of the only remaining seasons in the West. It's a month long, and I actually haven't participated the last couple of years, but there's nothing like a new puppy to motivate a hunter. And so, we went out after sage grouse. It's always an interesting affair because it's like an effort of belief. Like you have to believe that they're there against all evidence. So anyway, we got a couple of bombers, and it's been good. I just want to be out more.
I'm a little bit jealous, Andrew, because I had a hunt scheduled for mid-September in Idaho, and Idaho Game and Fish, a couple weeks before the season was to open, closed the unit that we're in. I don't know if they have any units open, but it was a combination of bad let counts. They had some fires in the area, but the locals that I had arranged everything to go hunt with warned me that this could happen. I booked my flights with Delta Airlines to fly out. Unfortunately, I bought non-refundable tickets, so that's a whole other story. But 2 weeks before I was to leave, I found out that the season was closed, and I am not going to Idaho to hunt sage grouse. So I'm a little bit jealous of you and the boys in Montana.
Well,
how does this go down, Andrew? Walk us through what a sage grouse hunt means and why you say it's an effort in hope.
In belief. Well,
mm-hmm.
So I live really on the edge of the prairie, and about an 8-minute drive out of town, I can be in essentially intact or contiguous BLM ground for about 50 miles. There's not private in-holdings. It's all public. It's all accessible. 15 years ago, when I moved into this country, I guess it's closer to 20 years ago now, it was nothing to go out after work. I worked for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks at the time, so kind of the sage grouse were on everybody's mind at this time of year. There were sage grouse, not quite everywhere, but you didn't have to look super hard for them. The limit was 3 a day. You could have 9 in possession. It was maybe a half-mile walk, and you'd bag your birds and be back in town. Over that 20 years or so, there have been, I think the diminution of sage grouse is real. I'm happy to report that we still have a hunting season. I don't think they're anywhere close to an endangered species, but there have been real declines. And so every year I would have this tradition of going out several times. Maybe I'm the one to blame for the declines. Who knows? But it was a kind of a cinch to get them. And then little by little, as I've encountered them less frequently, I just went less frequently. There's so many other things to do in September. And really for the last 4 years or so, I've devoted the time I would have spent sage grouse hunting to archery elk hunting, which I can still do in my county and on that BLM land, but it's a much bigger investment. But as I mentioned, I've got this new puppy in my life, and she hasn't experienced sage grouse hunting. So the other day, I think it was Sunday, our grouse season opens September 1st, so we're about a week into it now. Sunday, I decided I was going to take her out. And when I say it's an exercise in belief is you just park on a BLM gravel road and you look down this just lonely, arid, barren wash. And as much as I love this country, a lot of it is pretty inhospitable. It's big cactus flats, big alkaline hard pans. It's just not super inviting. I was going out in the middle of the day, too, with Miss Nellie. So it's about 80 degrees trending upward. so we packed water. I packed my shotgun. We just started walking, and I didn't really have any evidence that there were sage grouse in this particular drainage. But one of the things about sage grouse, especially on hot autumn days, they're going to be where there's a confluence of woody, mature sagebrush and water. So that usually means riparian corridors. And so we went down this dry wash until we started finding water. And we were about 2 miles into it before we found our first scat, just old dried sage grouse poop. But that gave me hope that, all right, they're probably going to be in here. So we kept walking. We got another mile into it. And, you know, as the owner of a new puppy, I'm a little worried about rattlesnakes. I'm a little bit worried about her, you know, going off on a jag if she flushes up a young mule deer or something. I mean, she's a little bit like handling nitroglycerin anyway, but man, she just gets it. She's checking in all the time. I can cast her out just with my hands, and so we're just enjoying a walk. It's a hot walk, kind of a lonely walk, but she picked up the scent long before I saw that kind of the best habitat, and she started just drilling in on them. And sure enough, I had actually let her get a little out of range, but we are 3.25 miles from the truck by the time we ran into birds, and it takes belief to commit and stay with it when you just don't. I mean, we didn't see a single bird until that first flush. Either it was one flock of younger birds, you know, family group, or it was two that had combined, but about 20 birds went into the air. And the thing with sage grouse is they're big, ponderous, chicken-sized birds, so they don't just hop up like a Hungarian partridge or a quail or even a pheasant. It takes them a while to kind of get aloft, and there's a lot of wing beats. They tend to fly low for a little bit. So the first thing I saw when I saw there were birds in the air was my dog leaping to try to grab them out of the air. So she was probably just within range of my shotgun, but clearly I was not going to take that shot. And so I watched this entire covey rise, and I didn't think I was going to get a shot. But one of the cool things about sage grouse is the covey rise breaks up pretty quick, and one of the birds peeled off to the left, and I got a shot and brought it down. And Nellie saw everything that was going on. The interesting thing about Miss Nellie is her prey drive is so strong, it tends to cancel her better judgment. And while she had been effectively avoiding cactus on that 3-mile hike, when she went for that downed bird, she just plowed right through a gigantic cactus patch. And so when she brought me that first bird, she was basically on her claws, tiptoeing. And after I said, "Atta girl," and I retrieved the bird from her hand and I loved her up a little bit, I had to doctor her, and I pulled out something like 50 cactus quills out of her pads of her paws. But the other cool thing about sage grouse is, especially, this is probably the first time this covey has ever been flushed, and they don't always flush at once. There's usually one or two immature birds that stay behind. After we admired the first bird in the bag, the limit here now is 2 birds a day. I wasn't intent on, getting a brace of birds, but I thought, you know what, let's just walk this out a little bit and really reward Nellie. And she got on another bird, got it up, and I got that second bird. It was the perfect day, and it was a great reward in the belief system.
It's pretty special.
That's pretty awesome. And, I had a dog incident this week that was not nearly as glorious. September 1st, I was home. I didn't hunt. It was killing me, but I had honeydew things at home with the family. And my wife and I took the dog out for a walk after dark. And there was a house cat that was out, and I had the dog on the leash because I'm in the suburbs, and they make me do that. And my dog went up and sniffed the cat, and the cat took a swipe at her. And she yelped, and she came back to me, and I was a little embarrassed because, it was a big house cat, but the house cat just kind of took my 1-year-old black lab pup and, put her in her place. Well, when I got back, her eye was closed, and she ended up getting scratched in the eye pretty bad, and I'm a little bit concerned that there might be some vision loss in one of her eyes. And
wow.
So my wife, and of course then I immediately had to leave on a business trip, so I'm out here in Utah, and my wife's trying to get a vet appointment to take a look at it. But I irrigated it, didn't think anything of it. I mean, I've had dogs get stuff in their eyes every time I've ever been out in the field, but it's lingered for several days, and her one eye's got a little bit of cloudiness on the side of it. So I'm a little bit concerned, but she doesn't seem any worse for the wear, other than she doesn't like you coming up on that side of her right now because she's keeping that eye closed almost all the time. So I'm looking for vet advice.
I had an adventure this weekend as well. So to complete the trio of dog stories, my family, my wife and the two little kids and I intended Saturday the 1st to get up and go dove hunting. And, if you don't make the outright intention of waking your kids up and getting going quickly and getting packed and everything as fast as you can and getting out on time, those of you who are parents out there probably know where this is going, but we let them wake up when they wake up because it's, school time and they're tired. And so the one day, of course, that they sleep till 9 ever happens to be opener. And so we got up and got packed up and got out to our spot at the prime dove hour of about 11 in the morning. And by prime dove hour, I mean not a single dove is going to fly in the middle of a hot, sunny September 1st day. But there we were. We got the decoy set up. We had the dog out on her first ever hunt. And the kids were so proud to set up the little motion decoy. And we sat, looked at the decoy for a half hour. And I don't know about you guys, but I've got enough upland bird hunt breeding in me that I just can't sit for a long time. It's one of the things that affects me as a deer hunter is I just don't get the same satisfaction out of sitting all day long as I do out of kind of pressing my luck and seeing if I can make something happen. And so off Scout and I went down the trail, and lo and behold, a dove flies over, and I shot the dove, and it landed right in the trail about 40 feet in front of the dog. And she looked at me like, what was that? We had just shot. We haven't shot around her a lot. So the shot was probably the curiosity, but then she's like, that thing fell over there. And she's looking at me and looking over there. And I'm trying to encourage her to go get the bird. And finally we walk up to maybe I'm 15 feet away from it. And she gets the scent of the bird and runs up on it. And the bird's twitching a little bit. And she licks it and noses it and looks at me like, can I eat this? Or what do you want me to do with this? And so finally, after literally I recorded it, it's 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Finally, she figured out that she should, in fact, bring that thing back to me, and she did. And so it was very, very special. My first ever hunting dog of my own, out with my family. Unfortunately, they didn't get to see it, but we got her first retrieve under our belt and brought the dove back. And my son, hearing the story, he's 5, promptly grabs the bird and throws it as far as he can to see if the dog will go get it again. And sure as heck, she had blood in her mouth and was so happy to run through the deep weeds and find the dove and bring it back to me. So we're on the board in the Dinger household. We got a red lab hunting machine of one total ever dove retrieve because we saw no birds the rest of the next 2 hours and basically sat there and sweat and laugh about the fact that our dog was scared of a dove. So we're on the board in the Dinger household, one dove. And then that Sunday night, actually, not to dominate the conversation here, but that Sunday night we had year number 19 in a row of the same group of guys in the same exact spot for our annual dove hunting kickoff. And we had a heck of a shoot and a good time. So I got my bucket filled a little over the weekend. That was really fun.
Well, on behalf of the On Gravel Nation, congratulations on getting your dog her first bird.
Thanks. Yeah. You'll laugh at the video. I'll send it to you sometime. It's a very tenuous first attempt at a retrieval, but she hadn't, and it's my own fault, but she's 6 months old and we just haven't been in the field. Obviously no seasons are open, and like a moron, I didn't keep anything over, I didn't keep any full birds or anything to train her with because frankly, we didn't know we were going to have a dog come this hunting season. So I'm eager to get her back out there. That's, I've always had dogs in our family. My dad and brothers have dogs, but I never had one of my own. But I can see why the bird dog thing is different when it's your dog. It's pretty special to train and to see that happen. I'm excited for it. And suddenly hunting feels new again, right? It's like this whole new paradigm of things to learn and things to try and, places to go. The thought of like striking out with my dog like you did, Andrew, on public land around Lincoln, which is pretty heavily hunted, but just to know that like she and I can go cruise around and see if we can find a bird is pretty exciting. Makes it fun again, or fun in a different way. So I'm on the board. She's on the board. Here we go.
Well, maybe, one of the things about, I mentioned the belief system that motivates sage grouse hunters, but I think it motivates all upland bird hunters, really, because you don't know that they're there. You have to believe. And sometimes it's a cattail slough where the belief system can be rewarded pretty quick. But, I think that's actually one of the things that does define bird hunters is they're not always evident. And so it also puts focus on the relationship with the dog. One thing I'm going to warn you about, Nellie has educated me on this, is, the ownership of the experience as the trainer of your own dog has great highs, but really, really dismal lows. Because Miss Scout will mess up, and there's nobody to blame it on, not even herself.
Yeah. So as high as I was on Saturday, we went out for a training session last night, and I threw the ball once, and she promptly brought it back. And every trainer of a dog knows exactly where this is going. But the next time I threw it, she ran the opposite direction and wanted to go chase Raleigh around on his bike. So one of us retrieved the dummy, and it wasn't the dog. The dummy retrieved the dummy.
Well, one of the difficult things about... Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. It's like, there's just such a trajectory. 6 months and the very beginning of probably the best hunting season you're going to have because there's zero expectation.
Yeah. So, guys, I'd love some advice from you on this. I work in downtown Lincoln, where Powderhook is based, and in many ways, I need I've hunted my whole life and I've been around dogs my whole life, but in many ways, I need a mentor. I need somebody who can show me the way from a dog perspective. So I have a dog question for you. I'm able to work with, or my wife is able to work with the dog on a pretty limited basis, but we aren't able to get her out routinely into, a grassy environment or into an environment that would replicate anything like hunting. The inkling is there for us to send her to a trainer and get her ready and get her done right, knowing that it would take a couple months out of her first hunting season, but that she'll only be 8 months when we get her back. Would you bite the bullet and send her to a trainer, or would you just accept a lesser trained family dog?
I'm always of the lesser trained family dog, but that's just personal preference. I'm not a field trialer. If I were a field trialer and I needed to keep my dog tuned up more, I would absolutely be sending them to trainers. And I look, trainers are worth their money and worth their weight in gold. Absolutely. But for me, the dog's first function in our family is to be the family dog, and her second function is to be my hunting dog. And I don't think my family would be happy with my dog out of the house that long. And I live with the fact that my dog is not always the machine that some of my buddies' dogs are, but she's mine. And the biggest thing is, if I'm going to give you advice of being a new dog owner, is don't brag about your dog, because if you do, karma will come back and bite you in the ass, and she'll embarrass you when you're hunting with your buddies. So don't brag on your dog. Set low expectations with everyone else. I mean, have high expectations for you and your dog, but set the public expectations much lower, because then it's easier to live up to them, and then you don't feel embarrassed when your dog is, doing
busting
something
birds out the end. Yeah. Andrew, what about you? Would you?
Actually,
go ahead.
Yeah, that was Bronson's advice. Is actually pitch perfect. I think I don't think I'd ever take my dog to a trainer, even though I know the result would be beneficial for me, the dog, everybody I live with. But I want to own every experience with the dog, whether it's good or bad. And I just have the feeling, because I've never actually had anybody else work with a dog that has been mine. I just feel like I couldn't own the successes and the victories to the degree that you do when you've done the work, both good and bad. The other thing is you don't wallow in the despair as much either, but it's just part of owning a dog.
Mm-hmm.
All
right. Well,
so this is my second dog. The one I've got now, Soka, is my second dog, Delta. I had when, I was married, had a house, but didn't have kids yet when I started her. And so she was a spectacular dog, and I miss her every day. Soka is my second dog. And really what I've been focusing on is training her with my son. And anyone who's seen my Instagram posts, almost all of them are not me doing the dog handling, but my son, because I want him to be connected and attached to the dog too, because this is going to be his first hunting dog as he starts hitting the field here this year and next year. And that's as important to me as, having a dog that can make a 200-yard blind retrieve, make it look like it's easy. Those are important things too.
I will say this.
So that's
about
my
kids,
mentoring.
One thing about Miss Nellie is my kids are a little bit older than yours, and so I think my expectation was exactly what you're doing with the boy. Is this would be kind of a kid's experience and experiment with a dog, and it has been. But one of the problems is there are 5 very active people in my household, all coaching and training Nellie slightly differently. And so what I've noticed is I think some of her early kind of schizophrenia was because she had different commands and different expectations from all 5 of us. So if I had to do it over again, I think I probably would have made one of the kids more of the point person. That's hard to do, practically, but I think it would have been good for Nellie because she did kind of go through the wilderness of just not being sure of what was what and who was serious about, discipline and limits. And it showed it still does show. Who am I kidding? But just all part of the process too.
Well, when you go and hire a dog trainer, they're working with your dog and they're teaching them all the right habits, but the good dog trainers, the ones that really make a difference with people that are going to then bring home a family dog, is they spend a significant amount of time training you about this is how I've worked with the dog. This is the command. It isn't a negotiation. You don't ask more than once. You enforce your commands. Those are all things that it ends up the dog trainer is training the dog owner as much as they're training the dog. So, and I don't know about you guys, but I have a hard time training my wife. She doesn't take training well. So it's trying to get a collaboration with everybody, but making it clear that there's one way of doing it. And I know I sometimes sound like the tyrant when I'm doing dog training. In fact, my wife won't let me teach her how to shoot. She's having my dad teach her how to shoot because she says when I'm giving her instruction with the shotgun, she says it sounds like I'm training the dog because I'm using that command voice. And I use the same voice whenever I'm teaching anybody how to shoot, but it's just that my wife doesn't hear that in the same way that other people do. My son, he's fine with taking those kinds of commands. So I guess there's a mentoring lesson there that sometimes it's you're better off having someone else work with your spouse than you.
Yeah, I don't know that my wife would agree to going to a trainer. I think she would probably argue that there's one person in our house that needs a trainer and it's not her.
Yeah.
But I may bring that up just to keep it sporting around the household,
Well, talk about blind retrieve. Well, one of the what you guys mentioned mentoring, and there are a few times in my life when there's like a confluence of either themes or details, but really this week and working with Nellie, especially like Dinger's going through with Scout the joys of the first year with 0 expectations. That was Nellie's last year. So this year we've got higher expectations, and I'm rewarded in about equal measure as my disappointment. That's just par for the course. But the way that the parts of my life have sort of converged this week, at least, is I don't know if we've mentioned this in the past, but I coach cross country here. In fact, I coach middle school cross country, which is like 40 Nellies, pretty much every day and every week. And one of the interesting things is I noticed I was starting to think about mentoring. Dinger and I have been working on this Powderhook app, and really the focal point of it is how do we how do we create a climate that encourages, welcomes, and gives tools to mentors digitally? I think the best kind of mentorship is handled face-to-face and in person, but it just doesn't scale that well. So we've been trying to figure out a way to do it digitally, and I think we're cracking the code a little bit, but I've never really thought about coaching as mentoring. Obviously it is. If you ask anybody else, they'd make the connection way sooner than I did. But sometimes I think we struggle a little bit with, geez, are we doing it right? Whether it's a dog or a spouse or a kid or a stranger, there's just a lot of self-examination and really questioning about this whole relationship. But the thing I was just writing about this week and was reminded of from my cross-country team is just show up. The best thing you can do as a mentor is just be there. I mentioned that. I'm not going to name any names with my cross-country team, but these are 6th through 8th graders. They are at every stage of physical maturity, emotional maturity, but they're kind of universally gangly, awkward middle schoolers. Not quite sure how the world works. They're going out for cross-country usually because a parent has encouraged them to do it. There are a few people who go out for cross-country as middle schoolers because they just love to run. But just showing up, just being there every day, regardless of the weather, regardless of anything else, you'd be amazed at how far that goes in that mentoring relationship. And in fact, I'd say that's where it starts. I've been doing it for enough years now. I can kind of see the benefits through all these kids who've gone through my program and now are in high school and even in college. I don't really have a takeaway, I guess, except that just do it and then just keep doing it and don't worry about the details. Just keep showing up. And in some ways, I think going back to the dogs, that's what you bring to them. You feed them, you love them, you have high expectations, but maybe they don't know it every day. You're just there for them. And if you're doing it right, they're there for you just because that's who they are too. So it's a little bit of a kind of a departure, I guess, from dogs to cross country, but that's my September, cross country.
So how's the team this year? You got to have a minute to brag on your family a little, don't you?
Well, I do. So my family now are all in high school. My boys are seniors and my girl is a freshman, and so they're actually all alumni of this middle school program that I'm involved in. And I'm not sure it's me as much as, well, I know it's not me as much as them. Yeah, they're pretty talented runners, each one of them. We're going through a little hardship right now. One of my boys is struggling a little bit with some kind of viral infection. Not sure what it is. He's pretty fatigued. He was the runner-up state champion last year, and his singular goal this year is to beat the kid who beat him last year by 10 seconds. But he's not feeling it, so we'll see. But, yeah, they're all running great. The beauty of cross-country is it's such an individual sport. The sky's the limit in terms of achievement. The bummer about cross-country is it happens in September and October when there's an awful lot of other things going on in a young hunter's life.
Mm-hmm.
So is cross-country in Montana where are you running on golf courses and stuff? Yeah, mostly. We occasionally will run on some other, like a park or something like that, but it's predominantly golf courses. See, I've always thought that was, maybe the second best use for a golf course. The first best use, obviously, being hunting Canada geese.
Or catching fish out of the water hazard. Yeah.
My friend Will Brantley, who's the hunting editor at Field and Stream and now Outdoor Life as well, used to work on a golf course. That was his summer job. He despises golf courses. He's not a golfer. He basically did it because he was really good at mowing grass. But he's got a pretty good perspective on it. He said, you're pouring chemicals onto this grass that can barely stay alive and wouldn't without your efforts. And then you're mowing it within an inch of its life, trying to kill it, almost daily, and then pouring chemicals back on it to restrain, give it sustenance again before you kill it the next time. It's like, it's just, it's exercise in futility.
I just like how you described Will Brantley as being really good at mowing grass.
Well, everybody has to, be good at something.
Mm-hmm. You didn't say he's a good rider. He's good at mowing grass.
Yes, I did.
So, I had a funny mentoring story come up. It wasn't funny. Right now I'm in the Wasatch Mountains of Utah. I'm at the Utah Outdoor Rec Summit. So it's all the companies in the outdoor recreation space. And basically the way that the outdoor rec community defines themselves is anything that's outdoor, public lands, rec related, as long as it's not hunting. They kind of self-identify as that hunting is different. And so I always like to show up and insert myself into these conversations as much as I can. So we're up at this beautiful resort up in the Wasatch Mountains, and my boss, Amanda Covington, she's the vice president for for communications and government relations. She was on a panel about getting more women into the outdoor rec industry and into the sport. And so she was giving examples of mentors in her career, and I didn't know she was going to tell the story, but she told the story about, joining this hunting company with Federal Ammunition and all of these brands that we're associated with, and not having any hunting experience, and that she went on her first hunt in Nebraska, and she talked about how one of her employees had mentored her. And she was talking about me because I took her on her first hunt and helped her get through hunter ed and basically, walked her through all the nervous things that come up with a new hunter that we take for granted, things that are second nature to us, how you carry your gun, how you dress, all these things. But she was telling these stories, and I got to admit, I got a little bit choked up because, I just thought of it as, look, I want my boss to be a competent hunter so that we can do our jobs well. But in the process, I help recruit and mentor a new hunter. And so then I started thinking about it a little bit. And, I guess I was mentoring, and it wasn't all that much. It was talking to her on the phone a couple times before the hunting trip and talking to her about, how we're going to dress and, what kind of boots we're going to wear, and then spending a little bit of time with her on the range and teaching her, how to stay still and move your gun when it's appropriate so that the bird doesn't catch you. And I didn't feel like it was this long-term, in-depth thing, but as she was telling the story yesterday, it kind of hit me that that I accomplished something there, and that felt pretty good. And so that's why when I look at what you guys are doing at Powderhook and trying to reach out to these people that are new to the sport, that want to be part of our hunting community, and creating a digital platform where they can ask questions, even if they're dumb questions, and feel a little bit secure that they're not going to get mocked and ridiculed like so many people want to do on every other hunting page. If you don't do it the way they do it, then you're stupid and they make fun of you. I really like that you guys are trying to create this community that's really, I think, has the potential to be one of the salvations for our sport. And I'll be honest with you, that's one of the reasons I was happy to get involved in this podcast, because I think the work that Powderhook is doing could very well save our industry. And so I'd love to hear about what you guys are working on in that realm.
Wow. Well, that's a heck of a tee-up, and I appreciate the very kind words. It means a lot, and your support has meant a lot. And your personal mentoring story really is the driver behind what we're doing. We want to create 100,000 people who can feel what you felt about mentoring Amanda. And we think that because it's digitally enabled, we think that those people can average each about 30 mentees over the next 5 years. And so our work is really about, can we recruit 100,000 people to have 3 million mentees use a little bit of technology to feel what we feel, to get started down the path of caring about what we care about, to feel invited into this extremely fun and extremely rewarding lifestyle. And so, man, those words mean a lot to me. And the part that you followed it perfectly, because what you did is you shared a really personal story. And one of the things I'm worried about with Powderhook's work is we can't use technology to supplant the personal accountability and the personal reward that goes into being a mentor. We can hopefully aid it and add to your ability to do that with more people. But the driver behind everything we're doing is, I want people, and I know Andrew wants people, or he certainly wouldn't be working on this with us. We want people to be able to feel that choked up feeling of having given somebody else a chance to feel what we feel. And we can make that just about hunting numbers. And we talk about the decline in hunting numbers at Powderhook a lot, but there is so much more joy and fulfillment in sharing and in spreading and in giving than there is in taking in general in life. But as it relates to something you're passionate about, to think that you could share and give and spread into somebody else this incredible thing, this gift we have of the way in which we enjoy the outdoors, is bigger than an app, and it's bigger than any one of us. And it's so foundational, I believe, to what it means to be a sportsman and what it means to be a hunter, that I hope we can ask and implore and invite and motivate hundreds, at least 100,000 people to get in and row the boat with us toward more people enjoying the outdoors. And I'll just say this, I had a great lunch with one of, frankly, the most brilliant men I know. He's a creative director at an ad agency here in Lincoln. I had lunch with him today, and he had just come back from Burning Man. And some of the audience might know of Burning Man, but it's this crazy party out in the desert for 10 days. And it's an art and music festival, but it's a whole bunch of other things kind of all wrapped into one. And for my friend, who is a fairly liberal, quite liberal actually, gun owner, shoots more often than I do, lover of the outdoors, it was really interesting to hear him say back to us what Powderhook is about to him. And what it meant to him was finally somebody talking about hunting in a way that he could relate to, because he didn't grow up as a hunter, and he doesn't value killing deer. He thinks deer are fun to watch, and he has deer in his backyard. But what Powderhook has done for him is to share with him how hunting fits into the broader concept of conservation, and how hunters are, when they're doing it right, actually helping the resource and taking care of our ecosystems. And it was really fun for him to articulate that back, because he's not somebody who I would have ever thought would be interested in hunting, and he is now, and he may never kill anything. He may be the guy that takes the camera out when we go. But he's suddenly a guy that has kind of tipped over the edge of saying, hey, this isn't at all what I thought it was, because Powderhook and other brands have taken the time to explain it in a way that's inviting and appealing to somebody who thinks about it a little differently than the traditional, whack 'em and stack 'em hunting brand has done in the past. Andrew, why are you involved?
I am involved because there's a big part of me that gets bigger as I get older that does want to give back in some ways, wants to be that coach of not just middle schoolers, but also people I've never met before who have some interest in the things that make my life complete, which is hunting in the outdoors and being close to the natural world. I think there's something you said, though, that I think is essential about, I think, both the possibility, but also kind of the steep slope of Powderhook. And that is, I think the hunting culture is changing for the better. I think you mentioned the traditional whack and stack, and I think that's been part of hunting for some time. I think it's a lesser part of hunting as we're going forward. Maybe it's just that my peer group is changing a little bit, but I feel like there are a lot of people who have reached a point in their life and their lives as hunters who realize the values that it brings them and want to share that with other people. So I think what we're doing at Powderhook is really timed beautifully to capture that and kind of ride that wave a little bit. It's interesting, as you go through the world, I talk to to people about what we're doing and what we hope to do. I still get an awful lot of people who say, I don't think fewer hunters is a bad thing. There's, it's more game for me and less competition for my favorite places. But I think that's starting to become a minority. I think people who hunt and treat hunting as a big part of their life understand its value and understand that there's some headwinds with it right now. And in order to perpetuate it, we all have to do a little something. And Powderhook's not the whole toolbox, but it's a few tools that I think are really useful. And it's exciting for me to see us kind of dig into it deeper, get it right, get it wrong, improve it. It's really the whole progression to me. Just to bring it back to the dogs again, I feel like we're still in the first year of this puppy. I think we're still figuring things out. We're figuring out what commands work and what sort of that play between, encouragement and discipline is and all that stuff. It's going to be really interesting to see how the next couple of years are when we start to get more people involved in it. We start to build this up into the scale that we hope it grows into. Yeah, I'm in it because it's everything that I care about rolled into one thing.
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of people out there in this hunting community that care too. I run into them every day. So, and more of them I know are downloading the Powderhook app. They're signing up to become digital mentors. And, I say this as someone who has no financial stake in Powderhook other than the fact that if this can help create more hunters, it's going to help the entire industry, which I am a part of. But I hope the people that have some time and some expertise, get involved, get on the app and sign up to be a digital mentor. I think the more of us that do that, the better the future for all of us is going to be. So I've got some buddies that hunt in the near urban interface, hunt geese, and they've kind of liked it as there's been development and there's fewer hunters in the area, and so the birds are concentrated on the places where they hunt, and they think it's great until the year they show up at their hunting spot and it's now an apartment complex being built and it's gone forever. And so, yeah, looking at fewer hunters as being less competition for you, that's great up until the point where there is no hunting anymore. When wildlife can't be managed effectively because hunters are not funding the wildlife agencies and paying the Pittman-Robertson taxes. But so I feel like I'm getting preachy now. But I'm in an outdoor rec conference with a bunch of so companies that are here like Big Agnes and Gold Zero, and I was on a panel yesterday with REI and Cool. Cool is a brand that I adore. Almost all my clothing that I wear outside of the woods is Cool clothing. But then everyone in the crowd was waiting for the fight to start between me and REI, because everyone knows that REI and Vista Outdoor have had their issues over the last year over gun control issues. But we had a great conversation, and one of the things that the guy from REI said that I was so appreciative of is he talked about the outdoor experiences that everybody values, and he included, some guys like to sit in a duck blind, and their experience is just as important to the outdoors and the future of the outdoors as the guy who is on a mountain bike or climbing a rock. So I've got hope, and I've got even more hope because I know the guys like you guys are running Powderhook.
Hey, Ryan. I heard out at that conference they're having a huge paddle sale. Did you hear about that?
I did not hear about the paddle sale. How did I miss that? What is happening with the paddle sale?
I don't know, but I heard it was quite an ordeal.
Oh, geez.
Oh, boy. Well, we got the dad joke, can you?
You did, and that was spoken like somebody who would go out and climb onto a Case tractor. I mean, that was bad.
Well, that was a tortured segue. We don't do too much preparation for these things. we don't do too much preparation for these. I'm sure that's a surprise to everyone who's listening. But we do try to, what are we going to bring up? We brought up the kind of the geographic fault lines between biscuits and cornbread in America. We have talked about what are some of the other sort of dichotomous choices we've had.
Flavored sunflower seeds or the real
flavored
sunflower
seeds or the bland plain ones. One of the great things about coaching this middle school cross country team is it's like an episode of The Office every single day. You don't quite know what's going to happen. There's going to be this little quirk or quizzical deal. And I've got a couple of kids on the cross country team who are pretty hard bit hunters, as 7th graders and 8th graders. First day back after dove season opened, one of the kids, just like an 80-year-old man, kind of leaned over to me and he said, he even kind of talked out the side of his mouth. He said, "Hey, Coach," kind of talked like an old man. He might have even spit in the dust a little bit. He said, "You let any arrows or lead fly this weekend?" like Lane, you were in 7th grade. You talk like an 80-year-old man. So another one of these
been
kids,
farming long, Lane.
Another kid the other day, actually just yesterday, he kind of sidled up to me. It was kind of a little bit of a lull in encouraging conversation. He said, "Coach, you a John Deere man?" Maybe this is rural Montana where I live, but I don't think a lot of middle school coaches get that question. But it took me back to my own life as a middle schooler. I grew up in rural North Missouri, and there was a big fault line within the kids. There was 10 boys in my class from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. When 9th grade, we started going to the county high school. But those 10 boys were nobody came into that club. Nobody left it. It was 10 of us, and we were all farm kids. And half of us were John Deere boys, and half of us were Case IH boys. And so I had to tell this kid on my team here yesterday. I said, "Well, I'm a John Deere guy. How about you?" And he did spit in the dust. He just turned around and then ran another lap. He was clearly a New Holland man.
Well,
New Holland.
See,
wow.
What he was thinking to himself was, that is some of the most expensive green paint you're ever going to find. But he didn't say it because you're the coach.
That's right.
What color should they be painted, Mr. Bronson?
Look, I worked on farms when I was a kid, and I'm first generation off the farm. My grandfather, Art Dunker in rural Otter Tail County, German immigrant. He got off the boat when he was 4 years old, didn't speak English until he got into school. He drove nothing but Alice Chalmers, and he planted nothing but Jake's seeds. He was not a terribly successful farmer. I love him dearly, but he and my grandmother were members of the Farm Labor Party, which what I've learned in later years tended to be the folks that had been not terribly successful in the farming world. They were small rock farmers. Now, my dad, he was always an international harvester guy. And all of our tractors that we had on the farm, over the years, were old enough. It was before Case had bought International Harvester, so we had all internationals. But today, when my dad goes out to play in his food plots, it's a 4-wheel drive John Deere. So I feel like I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to tractors. And so while I'd love to play your little argue over what's better, Pepsi or Coke game, I'm just going to stay on the side and just say, as long as it's diesel and not gas, I'm fine with it.
Oh, wow. Way to step to the side and start a new argument.
Well, that's clear, that he has left his farmer labor roots behind because they were all gas people.
Well, they probably were. So. Well,
as we leave this week's episode, I actually do have kind of a serious question, and it goes back to the mentoring question. So I'm a guy who makes his living throwing words around and crafting words, and Dinger and I have had this discussion. Like, it's pretty easy to know what the definition of a mentor is. Somebody who's teaching, somebody who's kind of passing on their wisdom and experience. we have struggled mightily with what the other side of that equation is like. And we call it mentee right now. I'm dissatisfied with that. So I'm going to actually challenge our audience. If both of you can think of a good alternative to mentee, we are all ears. What last words do you have, Dinger?
All right, my last words. Somebody just started standing in the wind. Sorry about our audio, Mr. and Mrs. Listener. But my last words are these. The idea of mentoring can be a high hurdle mentally. It can be this thing that's hard, especially if you don't have a lot of spots, or maybe you don't have a lot of time, or you live in an area that's difficult to drive all the way out of town to make it happen. But I'll just leave you with this. There was a study done in the outdoor industry not long ago by a pretty reputable group. The number one reason people have never been hunting is what? What would you guys guess?
They drive
I've
John
read
Deeres.
the study, so
The number one reason people haven't been hunting is they've never been invited.
they've never been invited. No one's asked them.
It has nothing to do with anti-hunting. It has nothing to do with not having access. It has nothing to do with not having the right gear or the time. It may have everything to do with any of those things, certainly. But the number one reason is because we didn't invite them. You know what the number one reason that somebody hasn't taken somebody new was? The number one reason people don't mentor?
They drive
Can you
Alabama.
Yeah, they drive Gleaner combines? No. The number one reason people cited for not having mentored a new person is nobody asked them. What a circle jerk that is, right? The reason people aren't going is because nobody invited them, and the reason that nobody invited them is they didn't know somebody else wanted to go. So we're all going to stand against the bleachers and watch the one kid named Eric Dinger out there dancing by himself like an idiot.
Throwing doves around.
Dancing like no one's looking.
With that, there's a great solution, and it's called Powderhook. Download the app and get busy asking and responding. Bronson, sounds like you're out in the wind, so we're going to leave it there. So I hope you're on gravel.
I am on gravel.
That's the only reasonable excuse for adding your wind to our audio.
Keep it on gravel and tune in next week for episode 7.